Come all you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
A battle in the heart of Alabama caught our attention. Coal miners in one community, they've been on strike now for months.
Working as long as 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, in some of the most dangerous conditions.
I really think that the labor movement is the single greatest force for democracy in the history of the United States.
The story of Alabama is a story of not just resilience, but of militancy.
I say no contract, you say no code. No contract, no contract.
If we ain't all free, ain't none of us free.
You're listening to Alabama's only union talk radio show, The Valley Labor Report, with Adam Keller and Jacob Morrison.
Hello, Tennessee Valley. This is The Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, here with my co-host and fellow agitator Adam Keller, and we are broadcasting live online and on the radio from the heart of the Tennessee Valley, the Spice Radio studio in Huntsville, Alabama. Today, a Huntsville construction worker fell to his death last week. A Montgomery Airport ramp worker who was killed on the job has been ID'd. The GOP is trying to defund law enforcement, and we think that's bad? We're going to talk about all that and more on today's Valley Labor Report. If you want to be part of the program today, we've got a phone number and the line is open. You can call or text 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. You can also leave us a voicemail and send us a text message throughout the week. If you haven't gotten enough of us by the time that we wrap here on the radio, or if you just want to see what we're up to throughout the week, get our snide quips about the news of the day, then you can find us anywhere you find anything online. We are on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, TikTok, Twitch, all at The Valley Labor Report. All at The Valley Labor Report. Just go to your social media platform of choice and search for us there, and we're probably there. If you want to become a sustaining member of the program, make a one-time donation or buy our merch, speaking of which, we do still have some of our Good Things Union Graph trucker hats and the Join a Union or the Boss Will Get You t-shirt. We have one large red Join a Union t-shirt. So if you want either of those things that I thought we were out of, but found in the trunk of my car, then message the show and we'll make sure to get those to you. So if you want to do that or become a sustaining member of the program, you can go to our website, tvlr.fm, tvlr.fm/store, and tvlr.fm/donate. If you're a member of a union, then think about getting your local to sponsor the show. Our largest single source of funding comes from our listeners, but the majority of our funding, that it's the largest single source is from our listeners, but the majority of our funding is from union sponsors. So if you think that what we're doing is valuable, is helpful, and particularly if you are a union member in the area, then think about getting your local or your international to sponsor the show. That's really a great way to help us stay on the air and to expand. So reach out to us for more details on that.
Absolutely, and it's not just unions. If you belong to an advocacy group, if you are a lawyer who does pro-employee legal work, if you are a podcaster, if you have a show of your own that you'd like to get the word out and reach our audience, let us know. We're happy to work with you. We just want to thank everyone for tuning in, whether you're a loyal fan or today is your first time listening. We really appreciate you spending some time with us. And for those of you who don't know, it's good to just remind folks every month or two that we do air live on WVNN right now, which is the right-wing talk radio station in Huntsville, Athens, every Saturday from 9:30 to 11. And with our overtime segment airing after 11 o'clock, that is online only. That is through YouTube and Facebook and Twitch. And we got our start on WVNN, oddly enough, which is the birthplace of Sean Hannity It is home to all sorts of reactionary propaganda that we find objectionable on a personal level. But we think it's important to get a different perspective out there to different audiences and multiple audiences. We're also happy that a portion of the show is replayed during the week on WZZA, the historic black radio station in Northwest Alabama, and on WHIV, which is a community radio station in New Orleans. We release the full episode on Spotify, Apple, and the various podcasting apps. So please subscribe to us on your app of choice and give us a good review. Throughout the week, clips of the show are released as standalone videos on YouTube and in some cases on TikTok. So if there's a specific segment or an interview you want to find, you want to go back to that you missed, we try to make it easier for you. And we're in the process of upgrading the YouTube channel, getting some good playlists going on. So if there's a particular topic you're interested in, you can find some of our back catalog there and some of the great guests we've talked to over the last couple years. Just do us a favor, hit subscribe, hit like. All of our content is free, so special thanks to all of you who donate, all of you who comment and call in, all of you who've liked us, shared us, reviewed us. That engagement on social media and the podcasting apps, it really does help. It's a quick, easy way and free way to support the program. If you believe it's important to have our own media of, by, and for Southern working class people, please consider supporting us however you can. Please share with your coworkers, your friends, your family, your neighbors, anybody you know in your circle that might be interested. Obviously, we know there's a lot of good causes to support, many of which we're going to tell you about each and every week. And our audience are working folks with limited incomes. So if you do find value in our project, you're willing to chip in a couple bucks, please know it means a lot to us. We've got some great stuff planned for 2023, as Jacob alluded to, as we grow the show and our content, and we cannot do it without you.
Yep, thanks for that, Adam. So we wanted to start off today with just a couple of quick hits that are, I think, and one of the reasons that I wanted to that I want to do these and mention these, even though there's not, there's some amount of actionable stuff in there, some takeaways, but also, there's whenever somebody like important, dies, we hear about it all the time. You hear about it there in the news, and it's just it's a big it's a big to-do, it's a big thing. And when working people die, particularly when working people die, I think it's particularly egregious when working people die in the course of doing their work and they don't get any of these accolades. They might get, as these people have, a quick hit in local media, and that's it. And nobody remembers their name, and nobody remembers what happened to them, or anything like that. And so I wanted to pay homage to them and their lives, and that is the first story is 59-year-old Huntsville construction worker Toribio Perez. He died in a workplace accident on Thursday, January 5th. Falling 20 to 30 feet to his death on a work site off of Old Monrovia Road in Huntsville. So I do hope that y'all will, if y'all are praying type folks, keep his family in your thoughts and prayers. This has to be, just a terrible situation. The worst thing would be, your family not being able to see you after you leave for work that day. And I also hope that folks that are elected in Huntsville, I hope they know his name. And I hope that they really think about if they're doing everything that they can regarding safety in the workplace,
right,
in the place that they're elected. I know, for example, that Huntsville does not have a responsible bidder ordinance. A lot of, and I haven't looked too deeply into this, but a lot of state and local laws mandate that the government, when you work with a contractor, when you're doing construction stuff, you have to give to the lowest, the lowest price, basically. And some of them say the lowest reasonable price, the lowest responsible price, or whatever. But in most jurisdictions, in a lot of jurisdictions, that responsible is not defined. It's just not defined. And I know that that's the case here in Huntsville. We do not have a responsible bidder ordinance that defines what type of safety regulations a bidder has to meet to work on public construction projects. And that's something that should change. Birmingham just passed a responsible bidder ordinance. I know that in Pennsylvania, friend of the show, Connor Lewis, president of the Seven Mountains Labor Council, he's pushing for a responsible bidder ordinance in his county because they have actually had, in that county, an increase in workplace deaths of 40% over the last year, which is really shocking. And so, not having that floor there can be really detrimental for workers. And I can't say for sure in this particular instance if there was any negligence on the part of the contractor. We're going to have to wait for more to come out. But there almost always is the thing. There almost always is whenever you hear about one of these stories. If any digging is ever done into it, which that in and of itself is not you can't take that for granted,
right?
That somebody's going to be digging into this and that you're going to be able to find out more, But when that happens, it's almost always the case that if any digging is done, that you're going to see that there's some sort of training that the worker who died ought to have had. There are some safety precautions that management either explicitly or implicitly encouraged workers not to follow, or winked and nodded as workers avoided them. And so, we do have a reporter in Huntsville that is going to be looking into this, Megan Plotka with WAFF. She reported on the death, and I've talked to her since then, and she said that she is interested in digging into the safety practices of this contractor. The contractor that Toribio Perez was working for is Ellington Construction. So if you have any tips about the safety practices of Ellington Construction or the circumstances of Perez's death, then shoot her an email at megan.plotka@waff.com. megan.plotka@waff.com.
Appreciate Megan being on that story and investigating it, and I hope she can come up with some more of the facts surrounding this tragic death.
Yeah, absolutely. And one more, a few weeks ago, actually on Christmas Eve, if I remember right, a Montgomery ramp worker died after she was, quote unquote, ingested. The news was reporting, and that's like a technical term, apparently, when something gets caught in the engine of a plane. She was ingested in the plane's engine, in the propeller. The union that represents her, that represents workers there, ID'd her as Courtney Edwards, the mother of 3 children. And the union has set up a GoFundMe. The union is the Communication Workers of America, Local 3645, and the local president is Danielle Prophet. She set up with the union a GoFundMe for Courtney's family, which has fortunately done really well so far. They had a $25,000 goal. They've raised $92,000. So I love to see. That's fantastic for as far as the GoFundMe goes, but it's obviously not going to be enough to replace Courtney. And so there again, if you're praying type folks, consider this family, keep them in your thoughts and prayers, and consider donating to their GoFundMe. They don't have like a really quick short URL, but it's we're going to put that in the Facebook and the YouTube chats And I'll say it here, just if you're listening on the podcast, it's gofund.me/57B7B85E. So gofund.me/57B7B85.E. So consider donating to that family. They're going to need, a lot of support, as 3 children now without an income that they were depending on, and without the care of their mother.
Right at Christmas too. Just very tragic, and I agree that it is nice to see that the GoFundMe has done quite well and it's surpassed its goal, and appreciate what the CWA local is doing down there to raise funds for that family. Yep, absolutely. All right, and with that, we are going to go to a break, and we're going to talk about this. We're going to dive a little bit deeper into the House Committee on Education and the Workforce, the new leader of that committee, who we've talked about on the show previously, actually. Talk about what fairness means and all that good stuff. So stay tuned, folks. You're listening to the Valley Labor Report, and we will be right back.
Hometown Action is a grassroots organization building a multiracial working class movement for racial, gender, economic, and environmental justice in Alabama's rural communities. We stand in solidarity with Alabama workers and are proud to support the Valley Labor Report's efforts to inform and build the Southern worker movement. Please visit hometownaction.org and follow our social media channels at Hometown Action to learn more about how you too can get involved to make the South a better place for all workers. Solidarity, y'all.
IBW 558 is like a great football team. You've got to have the aptitude, skills, and knowledge to outperform the competition. If you're a non-union electrician, now is the perfect time to get off the sideline and join our team. We have the absolute best wages and benefit package in North Alabama and Southern Tennessee. It's because our team stands together, bargains together, and our families benefit from it. With immediate openings, you have the opportunity to see why the IBW is the right choice.
Energy Alabama is a locally operated and membership-based nonprofit organization focused on advancing Alabama's clean energy future through education and advocacy. Many people in charge of infrastructure and building decisions simply don't know about how viable clean and renewable energy is. To that end, Energy Alabama has provided instruction to more than thousands of adults and tens of thousands of K-12 students across the state. We're working hard to build careers in clean energy and help everyday Alabamians save money on their utility bills. Learn more about our work and how you can join us at energyalabama.org.
Support for the Valley Labor Report comes from the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers Union. Learn more by visiting www.ifpte.org.
The attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs have stood with the working people of Alabama for over 40 years, providing skilled legal representation for your workplace injury claims. When you are injured on the job, it can be a scary time. The attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs have the experience to guide you through the process to make sure that you and your family are properly taken care of and your rights are protected. If you need help, call the attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs at 855-617-9333 or visit online at www.mtnj.com. No representation is made that the quality of legal services provided is greater than the quality of legal services provided by other law firms.
Support for this program comes from the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 136 out of Central Alabama. Learn more at ibew136.org.
Attention union members, membership organizations, podcasters, or anyone with a payment processing need. The future is here, and your organization needs to be prepared by working with Unionly. With Unionly, your union or organization can take payments on a mobile device, eliminating processing fees, giving you a better price than other payment processing methods, while at the same time supporting a union-friendly business with a specialized skill set to meet your needs. Your members will thank you when they pay their dues at their convenience without waiting in line to deposit cash or check. Start preparing for the future today by calling 206-595-8631 or visiting unionly.io.
Are you looking for a better future, a career that can have you set for life, and to be a part of something that's bigger than yourself? If you are, then consider a skilled trades apprenticeship with the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades. The work of IUPAT is all around us, from the industrial painters who work on the bridges to drywall finishers, floor coverers, the glazers who install the glass in our skylines, and so much more. With an IUPAT apprenticeship, you earn while you learn and receive benefits while learning the trade, including a pension. We provide world-class education free of charge. That's right, no student debt. Our starting salaries for apprentices that graduate is above the national median salary with benefits for entire families. And you have the flexibility to take your trade wherever you'd like in the country to work. IUPAT District Council 77 covers our entire region, so give Adam Booth a call at 205-603-3142 for more information. Again, that phone number is 205-603-3142. Come build a better future with us today and join IUPAT.
Come all you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Labor creates all wealth. All wealth should go to labor, and you are listening to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller. If you have anything to add, you can give us a call or send us a text. The phone number is 844-899-TVLR. That phone number is 844-899-8857. Appreciate you listening to the show. So let's talk about this. The Republicans, they took control of the House of Representatives. And one of the first things that they did was a bill to defund enforcement of the law. That was their first bill that they passed. But the thing that they did, one of the things that they did before that was reorganization of the committees. And one of the committees, and we talked about this last week, was the House Committee on Education and Labor. They changed the name to the House Committee on Education and the Workforce. And I was prepping for this segment a little bit because I wanted to talk about their statement that they put out regarding this. I wasn't originally going to do like a longer segment about it, but they did a pretty lengthy statement about it, and there's just some really silly things in the statement. And so I was doing some research yesterday for this, and I found out that this committee was originally commissioned under Republicans. They always, one of their big things of conservatives right now is, Democrats were the real racists. Democrats were the party of the KKK. Republicans were the party of Lincoln. Well, guess what the Republican Party of Lincoln did in 1867? They created the House Committee on Education and Labor. The House Committee on Education and Labor, and it stayed that name as far as I can tell. I didn't just spend hours and hours, looking at every single Congress, but from what I could tell, it stayed that way. The name that Republicans originally gave it until 1995, when Republicans first changed it to the House Committee on Education and something else, and then finally in like 97 or 99, they changed it to Education and the Workforce, which is what they've stuck with every time they take the House. Education and the Workforce since then, while Democrats have tried to stay true to American history and keep the politically correct mob from erasing our heritage and using this newspeak, Education in the Workforce, right? I mean, wow, this is just like 1987's George Orwell's. This is exactly like George Orwell predicted in 1987.
Is that right?
Yeah, it's exactly like that.
Yeah,
What's happening right now?
I'm sure you probably heard it on the radio.
Yeah. So
has to be true.
Has to be true. So here's what they said. Here's what they said on their, they made this big statement about, we're changing the name because we're, politically correct. We want to make sure that we don't offend anybody by calling it the House Committee on Education and Labor, even though that's what it was called for nearly 200 years or like 130 years. We want to make sure that we don't offend anybody, any bosses. We want to make sure we don't offend any bosses. I'm going to call it Education in the Workforce. Here's what they said. Each time the majority in the House of Representatives flips between Democrats and Republicans, the name of this committee changes. When Democrats control the House, the name is Committee on Education and Labor, while Republicans rebrand it as the Committee on Education and the Workforce. But why does that matter? This is, remember, Republicans talking. Quote, labor, unquote, is an antiquated term that excludes individuals. And I just want to stop and think about how this language is so like PC wokey police language. It excludes individuals. The term labor excludes, this is the kind of language that these same people would totally decry if we were talking about, a trans woman wanting to be called, Miss Jones instead of like being an asshole and calling them their dead name, right? I mean, this is, they would be, totally against this type of revisionism if it were anything else. Quote, labor, unquote, is an antiquated term that excludes individuals who contribute to the American workforce but aren't classified as conventional employees. Quote, labor, unquote, also carries a negative connotation, does it? That ignores the dignity of work. The term is something out of a Marxist textbook that fails to capture the accomplishments of the full spectrum of the American workforce. Okay, I don't think labor ignores the dignity of work. In fact, I think the people who are most attached to the term labor, unions, working people, the people that fight on behalf of working people, they will agree that most of them will agree that there's some amount of dignity in work. There's some amount of pride that working people, particularly union folks, craftsmen, tradespeople, there's a certain amount of pride that they have in the work that they do.
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely.
You can talk about it even better than, because I think, Adam, your work product is much more visible than mine as like a clickety-clack office worker, right? But, you putting together these shows that we do in Huntsville as a union stagehand, there's a certain amount of pride that you see when you get up and you see this, famous musician performing in front of a crowd of hundreds or thousands and be like, this couldn't have happened without me.
Right, yeah. And, locals take pride and want to, like, when folks come to Huntsville, IATSE 900 wants them to leave with a good impression. We want them to go to their next stop on the tour thinking, man, those folks in Huntsville really knew what they were doing. We had a great show. They put it together well. And if you talk to electricians, you talk to plumbers, you talk to any of the trades folks, they have a similar pride in their work, both on a personal level and also on behalf of their local and their brothers and sisters on the job. Yeah. But it's not just in the trades. It's in, industrial unions. It's anywhere. I think most working people take pride in their work ethic and do the best they can to work hard, given the circumstances they're in.
Right.
Now, the problem is, of course, not all jobs lend themselves to the dignity of work, and they certainly don't lend themselves to the dignity of the worker. But that's, obviously a separate conversation from what our Republican friend in Congress is trying to discuss.
Back to their statement, the left prefers the term labor. Actually, just everybody preferred the term labor until these, woke bosses wanted to try to rebrand, as they called it, right? This was just what it was called. This is just what it was, is labor. Because it creates a sense of enmity between employees and employers, which union bosses, love that phrase, and left-wing activists seek to stoke for political gain. This word also fails to capture how deeply intertwined workers and job creators are in their contributions to the economy. I love how they call elected union officials who are accountable to the membership and who have legal responsibilities to the union and who can be arrested for not being democratic enough. They call these people union bosses, but they call literal actual bosses, quote unquote, job creators. You have to love the doublespeak here. You have to love it. Though the left likes to treat employers like predators, we know that most job creators have their employees' best interests in mind. That's fascinating. Our economy would not function without the earnest cooperation of both employees and employers. That's why workforce is such a valuable term. In Representative Virginia Fox's own words, quote, workforce is a much better term to use because we are talking about all the people in this country who make a living. The American workforce encompasses or is built upon many different components: independent contracting, workers, blue-collar workers, and franchise ownership. to name.
Franchise ownership? No, I'm sorry.
Man.
You don't get to steal our valor. You are not a worker as a franchise owner.
Yeah.
You are not labor. You don't count. And you don't get to steal our valor. Sorry.
Using labor in the name of the committee omits the important contributions of many segments of our economy and inadvertently ignores the dignity of the work of these individuals. Republicans understand that for many Americans, work creates a sense of dignity and purpose, which has never been challenged. Work creates opportunities for Americans to earn a living, support families, and strive toward a greater purpose. Many workers also receive important benefits from their jobs, such as employer-sponsored health care. Language matters. Using outdated terms like labor creates an overt bias towards union bosses while widening fissures created by big labor between workers and employers. If we want a modern workforce, we should say as much in Congress. That begins with ensuring our name reflects our commitment to every individual contributing to our workforce, the Committee on Education and the Workforce.
Big labor. Huh?
Big labor. Big labor.
Big labor, but yet I noticed she doesn't say big employers.
Yeah, right.
You know, the people who actually
have all the money.
The economy.
Right.
The people who own the economy, who run the economy, who set prices, who set production, who own the means of production and run the means of production. They're just job creators. It's that big labor you got to watch out for. All 10% of us. Got to watch out.
Yeah, it's just super, super bonkers. I told you that we had talked about her before, the person who, and so Representative Virginia Fox is like now the chair of this committee, the committee on this new, woke term, Committee on Education and the Workforce.
God, that's reassuring.
Yeah, she is the chair now. She's a Republican from Virginia. So, if she's...
Wait, she's from Virginia and her name is Virginia?
Is that
correct?
Is that correct? I don't know. Now you're making me question. I don't know. But her last name is Fox, and she's the chair, and I think she's from Virginia.
And she sucks.
But so here's a question. She says in her statement that she wants the name to reflect our commitment to every individual contributing to our workforce. Presumably, at least, if we're going to take this at face value, we would say that you're committed to workers, at least in the same proportion that you are committed to bosses, right? I mean, at minimum, you should really be committed more to workers because just by, virtue of the fact that there are, thousands of times more workers than bosses, And so, if you're going to be committed to every individual equally, you're going to have to be committed to workers as a class more than bosses because there's just more of us because we actually, do the work. So I said that we had talked about her before, and we talked about her in the context of a hearing on Starbucks union busting, where Michelle Eisen, an actual real-life Starbucks barista, somebody who actually makes profit for Starbucks, who actually creates value for the economy, who actually does something, she was there in Congress. And so Representative Virginia Fox had the opportunity to speak to one of the individuals that she's saying she's got a commitment to. So let's see how she opens. Let's just remember, we played this clip before, but let's remember how she opens how she opens her statements and her address during this hearing.
Despite Democrats' aggressive attempts to force union representation on workers, Republicans are committed to ensuring workers have the freedom to choose whether they want to join a union. I'd like to remind my colleagues that federal law already protects the right of employees to organize or to refrain from doing so. Any reforms to our labor laws should help workers and spur economic growth, not exclusively promote the interest of union bosses. There's a reason why the PRO Act cannot clear the Senate. It is a deeply unpopular bill that undermines basic, long-standing worker rights and would take a wrecking ball to Main Street. Republicans just want fair and neutral labor laws. Instead of working together to create a level playing field, Democrats want to pass a union wish list bill to build on what they claim is a historic surge in unionizing.
So all she wants is just fair labor laws. And yet, if the thing that she's trying to say is that Democrats are just too on the side of workers, which, is,
debatable to say the least.
Debatable to say the least. And I was also under the impression that the GOP, that the Republicans were undergoing this populist pro-worker rebranding. Despite the fact that Josh Hawley literally doesn't think that pregnant workers should have access to water. That's the impression that I'm being given by the mainstream media is that Republicans are undergoing this populist rebranding. And yet here she is trying to say that Democrats are too committed to workers. But you would think that, okay, look, here's the deal. If I'm going to say Democrats need to be fair, you would think I would at least concede some of the most obvious discrepancies in our labor law, some of the most obvious unfair things that bosses are able to get away with, and try to work with Democrats to address those. You would think, because that's just a fact. It's just a fact that bosses have more power than workers. And it's just a fact that it didn't used to be that way. I mean, it's always been that way, but not in the proportion that it is today. It's just a fact. It's just a fact that bosses can get away with more things than workers. And one of those things is, let's look at what UPS can do. Matt Leikinger on Twitter, he is a UPS driver, and he recorded a video of UPS supervisors scabbing on the nurses in violation of their collective bargaining agreement with the Teamsters. The Teamsters and UPS have a collective bargaining agreement that states that UPS will not deliver across picket lines. That's in their agreement, and so that means it's binding. UPS has agreed to that, and now that's supposedly enforceable by law. And yet, here this UPS driver is recording supervisors delivering to this hospital that is on strike, crossing the picket line to do so. And yet, the consequences for UPS scabbing on the strike is only, according to Matt, going to be an insignificant amount of money paid in the form of a grievance check to a Teamster member. And the process of getting this grievance paid is going to take literal actual years. Literal actual years. Whereas, if Matt tried to take it on himself to enforce the contract and bodily put himself in front of them and not allow them to cross, he would be arrested. He would be arrested, even though he's trying to get them to enforce the law. But cops aren't going to arrest supervisors for scabbing, even though it's technically against the law because they're violating their contract, which is supposed to be legally binding. That's something that's obviously unbalanced. In that hearing, She heard from a Starbucks barista about how Starbucks workers are being retaliated against in violation of the law. In violation of the law. There were 7 Memphis, Tennessee baristas who were fired, and it took 9 months to get them reinstated. It was found that they were illegally fired for retaliation. Like a Republican circuit court judge found it.
Right.
Okay, so this is not, I understand and cop to being a pro-worker partisan, okay? But I also try very hard, I do try very hard not to misrepresent anything. I do not lie. But I also want to make clear when it's not just pro-worker partisans that are saying this stuff. This is a Republican judge in Tennessee that is saying this, that said that these Memphis baristas were unlawfully fired and ordered Starbucks to reinstate them, which they did 9 months later.
9 months.
How long would it take for the law to come after you if you did so much damage, if you did as much damage to an individual as 9 months without a paycheck? Which would be what? Tens of thousands of dollars? $10,000, $15,000 potentially? $20,000? If I went into your house and did $10,000 to $15,000, $20,000 worth of damage, would it take 9 months for the process to work itself out? For me to be punished? No, of course not.
I'll give you, just a practical example of something that I dealt with all the time, representing public school employees. From time to time, you would find where an employee had been overpaid, right, through some mistake, some accounting error, whatever it may have been. And boy, when they found out they got all of their money back, often all in one lump sum, in one check, I will never forget a custodian having that happen to them. They had been overpaid slightly for a couple years, actually. It was not enough to really notice on each individual check, but when you added it up over time, it was a substantial amount to be deducted all at once. They didn't care that this custodian wasn't sure how they were going to keep their lights on that month, right? That they weren't going to be able to pay their bills that month. They made sure they got all their money back. They clawed it back so fast, as Infinite Content wrote in the chat. I mean, very quick about clawing back that money. The flip side to it, when employees would come to me because they've been underpaid in some cases for years, totally different story. It would be months and months of going through grievances. If that's not working, trying to lawyer up, see if we can get lawyers to scare them into doing the right thing. Sometimes even that wouldn't work. Then you do have to go to court and hope that you get the right judge, hope that you can actually make some headway in court, and hope that maybe after a year or two, your problem is actually resolved.
Right.
Maybe. Right? That is the difference between when an employee is overpaid versus an employee being underpaid.
Yeah.
And I think that's a real practical demonstration of the balance of power in our workplaces.
But she's not interested in rectifying any of that. The only thing, and this is the crux, right? This is the crux. If you ever hear about any change to workplace dynamics that Republicans support, ask yourself who it benefits. Does it disproportionately benefit workers or bosses? It's always, always, always bosses. And that's the rub. That's the rub.
Right.
So it's obviously, they're not interested in a fair law, in fair law for working people. It's just a silly thing to believe. It's a silly thing to believe.
Well, and I'll also add, to sort of riff off a comment we got in the chat from Free American 2020. He said, shame we had House, Senate, and Pres and did nothing for worker safety. Maybe next time they will promise us.
Yeah, right. Right.
Yeah, I think, just to reiterate, our criticism of the GOP does not absolve the Democratic Party whatsoever. And I would agree with that assessment. In the past 2 years, we've seen very, very little done to advance the interest and the goals of working class people, including safety on the job. We have seen an improvement in the National Labor Relations Board, an improvement with the head of the FTC. There's a couple of little things you can point to here and there, but all in all, it's
but it really is.
It's like drops in a bucket, right? It's nowhere near what needs to be done, considering the drastic imbalance of power, and imbalance of wealth, imbalance of law. It's just so much needs to be done, and the Republicans are making it clear they're going to make it worse, and Democrats have made it clear that they weren't up for the task.
It really is amazing that some of the smaller things, like all of these, and we're going to be talking about this a little bit later in the program, but all these executive agencies that are tasked with enforcing labor law, workplace safety, all this stuff, all of these things have been underfunded. OSHA, we talked to an AFGE member, I believe, who works for OSHA, about the underfunding at OSHA. We've talked
EEOC. That's another one.
EEOC, maybe that's what I was thinking of. EEOC is another one. We talked to a field attorney at the NLRB about these, and so I do not understand. It's not a controversial thing for Democrats to fund these agencies to enforce the law.
Well, it's controversial among some in the donor class,
right?
But it should not be controversial by and large, though. You're right.
Yeah. But before we talk about that, let's get to last week in Southern labor. We will head to a break, and then we'll come back and we'll dig into that a little bit more. So want to make sure that we get to this, because last week in Southern labor is a segment that we do every week, mostly where we tell you what happened in the labor movement in the South. We pull the information from Jonah Furman's newsletter, Who Gets the Bird, which compiles all the information for the entire United States. So if you want to see what's going on outside of the South, subscribe to his newsletter, whogetsthebird.substack.com. This is a longer list. It's for 3 weeks, so some small shops have been left out. And with that, let's jump into new organizing for the week of December 18th to January the 8th. 100 workers at a 5th Trader Joe's store, this time in Louisville, Kentucky, have filed for an election with Trader Joe's United, after stores in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and Hadley, Massachusetts successfully unionized. One in Brooklyn, New York, lost their vote, and one in Boulder, Colorado, withdrew their petition before the vote. The Boulder, Colorado one was with UFCW Local 7, not the independent Trader Joe's United. 60 lumber workers at Patrick Industries in Decatur, Alabama, are organizing with RWDSU. 31 workers at farmers market operator Fresh Farm Markets in D.C. are organizing with UFCW Local 400. 26 electricians with TL Electric in Corpus Christi, Texas, are organizing with IBEW Local 278. 7 staffers at social services nonprofit Kahoma Opportunities in Clarksdale, Mississippi, are unionizing with the Teamsters, Local 667. 5 warehouse workers at Dr. Pepper Snapple Group in Fairmont, West Virginia, are joining UFCW Local 400. 5 workers subcontracted out of the El Paso-based Training, Rehabilitation, and Development Institute, a staffing agency for disabled workers, are joining the Operating Engineers, Local 501, at 3 Federal and Border Patrol offices. 26 workers at Deep Roots Harvest Dispensary in West Wendover, West Virginia, voted 14-8 to join UFCW Local 711. 10 workers at La Colombe in D.C. won that chain's first union 6-1. With UFCW Local 400, the same local that also notched a win at Mom's Organic Market in College Park, Maryland, the third of the chain's 22 locations to unionize, and the first with the UFCW. 10 HVAC workers at Fort Knox, Kentucky voted 6-4 to join UA Local 502. 105 workers who bottle Pepsi products for Acadiana Bottling in Youngsville, Louisiana, lost their bid to join the Teamsters Local 270, 39-56. And 235 workers who make fans for Lasco in Fort Worth, Texas, are facing a decertification petition of their union, the Workers United Southwest Regional Joint Board. in strike.
Tough loss there in Louisiana for the Teamsters, but was certainly happy to see Decatur, Alabama on the list there, and wishing RWDSU all the luck in that campaign.
Absolutely. In strikes and bargaining, the UMWA strike at Warrior Met in Brookwood, Alabama rolls on. You can listen to our conversation with the Secretary-Treasurer of the International Union for some of the reasons the strike has lasted so long. 400 some odd workers and 3 steelworkers locals at the West Rock Paper Mill in Cottonton, Alabama, rejected a so-called last, best, and final offer from the company to end the 3-month lockout. The News Guild has won what is apparently the first union contract at a Texas newspaper after a 24-day strike at the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. In politics and legislation, as Congress faced a partisan changeover, the institution suddenly got motivated to do a few things and managed to pass increased funding for the NLRB, though far short of union demands, before the Democrats handed over the House to the GOP. One of the GOP's first moves has been to attempt to declare that the Congressional Workers Union's victory in securing unionization rights for congressional staff is defunct. Literally trying to take away constitutional rights from their staff. It's amazing. Management lawyer John Ring is finally off the National Labor Relations Board. The Democrats are expected to just let his seat stay empty for a while, hopefully making good use of the 3-1 Democratic majority. The Federal Trade Commission announced that it is banning non-compete agreements, which suppresses wages by barring workers from taking certain jobs, even after they leave an employer. Just a helpful reminder that the federal government can, in fact, use its immense power to intervene on the side of workers. It just chooses not to. The Supreme Court is hearing arguments in Glacier Northwest. We're going to be talking about that later in the program. The latest judicial attack on union rights in this country, which would open private sector unions to massive lawsuits for damages caused by striking. The New York Times looked at White House fallout from the rail strike, and get this, SMART president, SMART is a union, the sheet metal and something or another, President Jimmy Ferguson gave an interview on basically why Biden, quote, did the right thing.
Wow.
So you can just...
Oh, surprised to hear that coming.
Have your own thoughts on that. And in internal union politics, it was outside of the South, but it's worth mentioning that there were a couple of huge labor actions recently, which was the country's largest strike. 36,000 University of California grad workers and researchers with UAW Local 2865 and Student Researchers United voting to ratify contracts by about 62% and 68% respectively in a contentious final stretch. Also, 17,000 NYC nurses with the New York State Nurses Association ended a 3-day strike, securing wage gains and making progress on staffing ratios. And so that leaves the biggest strike now as CNH Case Agricultural implements the strike there by the UAW Locals 807 and 180 in Burlington, Iowa, and Racine, Wisconsin. After months of no movement, the workers rejected a new tentative agreement last weekend. After 8 months on the picket line, that's a big move for sure. We're going to take our final break, and we're going to be right back talking about the GOP defunding law enforcement. Also going to be talking more about that Supreme Court strike case. So don't go anywhere. You're listening to the Valley Labor Report. We will be right back.
Energy Alabama supports consumers and is a leader in advocating for them. We have been able to successfully fight off utility rate increases in the state, reduce fees for electric vehicles, increase electric vehicle infrastructure spending, and secured a $100 million refund by Alabama Power after the utility overcharged customers for fuel. To learn more about our work advocating for customers and join the fight, go to energyalabama.org.
There's a lot of talk about a shortage of workers, but that's not the case with IBW 558. We have provided our customers over 3,000 workers and performed over 3 million man-hours in a pandemic year. With 8,000 OJT hours, 900 classroom hours, OSHA 30, and a state license, our members receive the equivalent of a master's degree. That's what makes IBW 558 the right choice for your electrical needs. Look us up at Facebook or at IBW558.org.
North Alabama DSA is looking for folks to work for a better North Alabama. They prioritize mutual aid, municipal activism, and union solidarity. Contact them on social media or dsanorthalabama@gmail for more information.
Support for this program is provided by the International Association for Machinists and Aerospace Workers, Local Lodge 44 in Decatur, Alabama. Learn more at iamaw44.org.
Hometown Action is a grassroots organization building a multiracial, working-class movement for racial, gender, economic, and environmental justice in Alabama's rural communities. We stand in solidarity with Alabama workers and are proud to support the Valley Labor Report's efforts to inform and build the Southern worker movement. Please visit hometownaction.org and follow our social media channels at Hometown Action to learn more about how you too can get involved to make the South a better place for all workers. Solidarity, y'all.
Support for this program also comes from the Ironworkers Local 477. So if you are looking for contractors with lower than average EMR and TRIR, they tell me that if you need to know what those mean, then you will. Or if you need to supplement a workforce at any level for any amount of time, short or long term, if you need ironworkers that come trained and certified at no extra cost, or if you need workers from superintendent down to general laborer, and you're looking to start work on a project, or you're unhappy with your current contractor situation, you need to call my friend Jeb Miles with the Ironworkers Local 477. They only work with the best in the business, vetted contractors, and can do all kinds of jobs from roofing to steel and bridge erection, from welding to heavy rigging, from structural repairs to machinery alignment, and much more. They supply manpower on 4 of the 5 largest projects in North Alabama, so you know they're legit. If you need good quality, safe, efficient, diligent, and knowledgeable workers on your job, then you need the Ironworkers Local 477. Call Jeb Miles at 256-383-3334 or via email at local477@bellsouth.net, and make sure you tell them that you heard about them on the Valley Labor Report.
We're the nurses, firefighters, and claims representatives that help keep our government services running. We respond to natural disasters. We care for our nation's veterans, and we investigate discrimination in the workplace. We are federal and D.C. government workers, and we are proud to serve the American people. Working in more than 70 agencies across the government, we know we can fulfill our mission because our union has our back. Learn more at afge.org. Paid for by the American Federation of Government Employees, AFL-CIO.
Support for this program also comes from the Mid-South Council of Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union. Learn more at rwdsu.info.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Alabama's only union talk radio show. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, here with my co-host and fellow agitator Adam Keller. We are broadcasting live online and on the radio from the heart of the Tennessee Valley, the Spice Radio studio in Huntsville, Alabama. Are you hearing the cracking in the music?
Yeah, that was a little weird. Don't know what that was about, but we'll sort it out.
So, yeah, I've been talking about this. The first bill, been teasing this segment the whole show. The first bill of the GOP House of Representatives, the first bill that they passed was to defund law enforcement, to defund enforcement of this country's laws. So what am I talking about? I'm talking about their bill to reverse the $80 billion in funding that the Democratic Congress passed for the IRS in the previous session. And obviously, we don't typically think about the IRS in terms of law enforcement, but that is an actual literal factual, description of what the IRS does. Our tax code is law, and the IRS enforces that law. So I don't know. I always hear from, just random, if I'm just talking to people just on the street or whatever, friends, family or whatever, they say, oh, if you don't like the country's laws, then, advocate for them to change, but you can't just, and then typically they're talking about, they, for some reason, think that, that you have to enforce every single law, no matter if you like it or not. And so, this typically comes up in the conversation of like decriminalizing marijuana at a local level or something like that. Like, oh, well, I don't have a choice. You want to make it legal and make it legal, but we don't have any discretion in how we choose to enforce the law. And yet that energy is totally gone when it comes to enforcement of the country's tax laws. There's just no energy for that. So they passed that bill based on lies that this money would create 87. One of those lies is that this bill would create 87,000 new IRS agents. It just simply wouldn't do that. It simply would not do that. For one, only about half of this money is to be used on enforcement. The other half is for improving taxpayer services, which are terrible. The agency in the last year only answered about 13% of the calls that it received. 13%. Improving taxpayer services, so having more people to answer phones, right? That's important. And the agency's infrastructure, the rickety technology that they use, and the main thing that they have, like the files that they have on people, the backbone of that is 60 years old. So half of this money is for modernization, taxpayer services, stuff like this. Only half of it is for enforcement. The other half is for the other stuff. It's also important to understand that this money is going to be spent over 10 years, right? It's not to be spent over the next year. It's to be spent over 10 years. And there are an expected 50,000 plus resignations and retirements coming in that time. So, there's going to be 87, and so where this 87,000 number comes from is that's an estimate of how many total employees that this money would be able to hire over the next 10 years. So over 50,000 of that is just replacement. And that is replacing staffing at the lowest level. Get this. The IRS has fewer frontline experienced examiners in the field than at any time since World War II. And fewer employees total than at any time since the 70s. Former IRS Commissioner Charles Rettig, who was appointed by President Donald Trump. So just replacing those 50,000 employees is just replacing the IRS at basically the lowest level that it's been in modern history. So it's important to understand how short-staffed the IRS is. And that short staffing has an impact on their ability to enforce the tax code. From the Washington Post, the IRS has only about 6,500 agents to audit 178 million tax returns.
Now, I'm not great at math, but that didn't work out too well.
That's insane. And that obviously impacts what the agency can do, right? There were only 7,700 agent audits of tax returns listing over $1 million in income last year. Only 7,700. That's down from about 41,000 a decade ago. So we have had, as a total number, less than a quarter of the audits than we had 10 years ago of people who have tax returns of over $1 million. Less than a quarter in number. But today, there are 22 million millionaires in the country. In 2012, there were only 9 million. So there are more than double the amount of millionaires, and yet they are audited at less than a quarter of the rate than they were 10 years ago. And that's another lie that they're going on about, that this enforcement is going to be affecting you disproportionately. I mean, the bill was called like protecting, small families and small business owners or something like that. Protecting families and small business owners. That's just absurd. I mean, for one, these are the same people, as I understand, that are just super loosey-goosey with our constitutional rights to privacy, right? The Patriot Act, do you remember that? If you don't have anything to hide, what's the deal? So, it's weird that they're on about this, and it's also important to say that no matter what your income is, you should pay your taxes. You should pay what you are legally obligated to pay. That's the thing about living in a society, right? If you don't like that your taxes are so high, then you can advocate and vote for taxes not being that high. But it's important that everybody be under the same regime, and we have to abide by the same laws. Abide by the same tax code, right? That's important. But the administration has explicitly said that the new funding is going to be going towards auditing wealthier folks as opposed to people that are not wealthy. And we have historical data that shows that that's what the IRS does with that money.
And that's certainly what I would hope. I mean,
yeah,
there's really no sense in auditing a bunch of working class families because what you going to find?
You're right, not much. Or
we know where the fraud is happening and where people are dodging taxes, and it's not working people making $50,000 a year. Right. Those aren't the families that are cheating on their taxes.
Yeah, it's just it's bonkers, and so we have historical data to show what the IRS does when it has more funding, and they disproportionately audit wealthy people more, and that makes sense because it takes money to audit wealthy people, right? Because they've got all these fancy ass lawyers that can try to contest the claims.
Right. And
whereas if you
looking
audit
for every loophole they can find.
If you audit me and you say that if I get something from the IRS saying you underpaid and there's not anything that's like just super crazy, I'm going to be like, "Oh, oops, my bad," and I'm going to write a check to make up the difference. That's what most working people are going to do. We're not going to go out and retain lawyers, but if a millionaire is audited, that's obviously what they're going to do. They're going to try to get out of it. So it's going to take more resources. And so as resources are drained, they just audit these people less. So here's some data on that. The audit rate for Americans earning more than $5 million a year plunged to just over 2% in 2019. Just over 2% in 2019 from over 16% in 2010. The audit rate did also fall for less wealthy people, but at a smaller rate, right? For less wealthy folks, it was kind of basically the same, whereas for more wealthy folks, it plummeted. And that, just that makes sense because of the way the world works. So, based on the statements of the administration, the statements of the Treasury Secretary, the intent of Congress, and historical data, we have no reason to believe that this money is not going to be disproportionately used to audit wealthy people. Now, look, okay? The Treasury Secretary has put out a directive for the IRS to come up with a detailed plan about how all of the money is going to be spent within 6 months. And that was back in August that she sent that directive. So here in a couple of months, we're going to see this plan for how the IRS is going to spend all of this money. And I'll be the first one to say, if that plan comes out and the entire half of this bill, half of this $80 billion that's supposed to be used for enforcement, if they use all of that to audit people, if they have a plan that says, okay, look, we're going to use all this money to audit people that have less than $400,000, I will come out and I'm going to eat crow, okay? I promise I will do that, because that would be bad, and I would oppose that. That would not make sense fiscally. That would not make sense in terms of fairness or anything. I would oppose that. That would be bad, and I would eat crow. But we've got no reason to expect that that's going to be the case. And all of these lies are an attempt to obscure a through line in all of their policies, and that is benefits to the wealthy. After all, I want millionaires to be able to cheat on their taxes more easily is not a very convincing, it's not a very convincing election slogan, right? But that's exactly what this is. That's exactly what this is. And it's the same basic premise for all of their attacks on agencies tasked with enforcing laws that don't explicitly help wealthy people. The National Labor Relations Board, the EEOC, OSHA, the Department of Labor, MSHA, all of these agencies we have talked about at different times about their underfunding under both Democratic and Republican administrations, but particularly under Republican administrations, and how that affects their abilities to carry out their mission, which is to help working people, to ensure that we have safe workplaces, to ensure that our workplaces are free of discrimination and harassment, to ensure that our right to organize is being respected. Republicans are attacking all of these things, and yet they're not changing the laws. They're just deconstructing the ability of the government to enforce them.
Right. It's the sabotage approach. It's the sabotage approach of underfunding public institutions, staffing public institutions, or staffing the leadership of public agencies with people fundamentally opposed to their mission, and you sabotage from the inside out.
Yep.
And we've seen this carried out across the public sector, specifically with these agencies designed to intervene on behalf of working people, but really all of the public sector, all of the state that exists out there that in any way is available for regular people, such as public schools.
Right. Yeah. It's so frustrating. It's so frustrating when you hear these people talk about, like, and it's kind of, I'm saying this like in a tongue-in-cheek way that this is law enforcement, but I mean, they're always talking about, like, I support law enforcement. I support law enforcement. You got to follow the law. You got to follow the law. If you just complied, there would be no issue, right? They're always talking about this in other circumstances, but anytime the law negatively impacts wealthy people or bosses, it's a totally different story. It's a totally different story. And I want folks to understand that. And I want folks to, that's why I'm, talking about this and bringing out these comparisons, because not enough people understand that.
Right.
Not enough people understand that.
And, one of the other aspects to this, like, internal sabotage of these agencies is that it then goes on to prove it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Because the Republicans tell you that the government is not able to help you, that the government will only hurt you. They then make it their mission to ensure that is the fact, right? By underfunding, by sabotaging, by deregulating, so that when you do come to an agency such as OSHA or EEOC or NLRB for assistance, right, Republicans have ensured that they're not able to execute their mission to fidelity, and then you walk away as the citizen thinking, well, yeah, I guess they're on to something. Yeah, the government really can't really do much for us, can it? So that self-fulfilling prophecy, I think, is very dangerous. And while, yes, of course, we're focusing on Republicans and their dedication to this, Democrats have their share of the blame as well. Absolutely. Because what we're talking about here is essentially 50 years of neoliberalism, of Reaganomics, of defunding public institutions and sabotaging public institutions, deregulating, and essentially rolling back all of the progress that was made from the 1930s through the 1960s.
Yeah. Yeah.
And in some cases, even before then, right? And in some cases, we're going back to the progressive era and undoing that.
Right. Yeah. Before we go, I wanted to make sure that spend a little bit of time talking about this. And Adam, were you able to put that clip up in the scene?
I think so. We're going to see if it works.
So Monday is MLK Day. And if you're a federal employee, you get the day off. If you're a state employee, you get the day off for Robert E. Lee / Martin Luther King Day, which is really gross. Really, really gross.
Yeah, yet another vestige of the lost cause mythology, which has been so dominant here in Alabama and other parts of the South.
Yeah. But
because for people who don't know, Robert E. Lee was not born in Alabama. He's not native to Alabama.
Right.
So yeah, just wanted to clarify that for our non-local listeners.
Yeah. But Martin Luther King did do a lot of stuff in the in Alabama. He was very integral, obviously, to the civil rights movement. And in the latter part of his life, he was working to, he always had an economic plank, but in the latter part of his life, he was really focusing on that. And the last speech that he gave was in support of striking sanitation workers in Memphis, Tennessee. And so I clipped a section of that. It's a 43-minute long speech, and I would recommend going and listening to the whole thing. I would recommend, so many people, I think that there are so few people that have actually sat and listened to a full Martin Luther King Jr. speech. And it's really worth doing that because as an orator, he's amazing. And the things that he's talking about is still relevant in large part today. Still important to hear that message. And so, definitely think of, if you've never done that, if you've never listened to a full Martin Luther King Jr. speech, then do that this weekend sometime. There are several on YouTube. Just find one and listen to it. It'd be worth your time.
Absolutely. And for our audience, of course, highly recommend you check out some of Dr. King's work in relation to labor, because if you go back and you check his record, it's union hall after union hall that he's visiting. It's union convention after convention that he's speaking to, strikes and picket lines that he's showing up at.
Right.
He was a champion of labor. He was a friend of labor, and he saw very clearly, as you said, especially the latter part of his life, the connections between capitalism, militarism, and racism, the ways in which they intertwine, the ways in which these struggles are intertwined. So I consider Dr. King to be a hero of America, not just for his work fighting racism and fighting for civil rights, but for his work on behalf of working class people in general, and poor people in particular. And so, I echo your sentiments.
So I pulled 7 or 8 minutes from the last speech that he gave in support of those striking sanitation workers, talking about, the need to foster like a dangerous unselfishness. And we've been talking about comparisons and his hypocrisies, and it's interesting to note that MLK as an icon of the left, of civil rights, and of anti-capitalist sentiment. At the same time that he's talking about this, that he's a preacher, an icon of the right, Ayn Rand is on TV talking about the importance of greed, like actual literal greed. And, she's like an icon for several Republican politicians, and she's talking about the importance of greed, how altruism is evil. And so, those are things to consider as well. So let's take a listen to this clip from his speech in Memphis, Tennessee.
Now let me say, as I move to my conclusion, that we've got to give ourselves to this struggle until the end. Nothing would be more tragic than to stop at this point in Memphis. We've got to see it through. When we have our march, you need to be there. If it means leaving work, if it means leaving school, be there. Be concerned about your brother. You may not be on strike, but either we go up together or we go down together. Let us develop a kind of dangerous unselfishness. One day a man came to Jesus, and he wanted to raise some questions about some vital matters of life. At points he wanted to trick Jesus and show him that he knew a little more than Jesus knew and throw him off base. Now that question could have easily ended up in a philosophical and theological debate. But Jesus immediately pulled that question from midair and placed it on the dangerous curve between Jerusalem and Jericho. He talked about a certain man who fell among thieves. You remember that a Levite, and the priest passed by on the other side. They didn't stop to help him. Finally, a man of another race came by. He got down from his beast, decided not to be compassionate by proxy, but he got down with him, administered first aid, and helped the man in need. Jesus ended up saying this was the good man, this was the great man, because he had the capacity to project the eye into the thou and to be concerned about his brother. Now, you know, we use our imagination a great deal to try to determine why the priest and the Levite didn't stop. At times we say they were busy going to a church meeting, an ecclesiastical gathering, and they had to get on down to Jerusalem so they wouldn't be late for their meeting. At other times, we would speculate that there was a religious law that one who was engaged in religious ceremonial was not to touch a human body 24 hours before the ceremony. And every now and then we begin to wonder whether maybe they were not going down to Jerusalem, down to Jericho rather, to organize a Jericho Road Improvement Association. That's a possibility. Maybe they felt that it was better to deal with the problem from the causal root rather than to get bogged down with an individual effect. But I'm going to tell you what my imagination tells me. It's possible that those men were afraid. You see, the Jericho Road is a dangerous road. I remember when Mrs. King and I were first in Jerusalem. We rented a car and drove from Jerusalem down to Jericho. And as soon as we got on that road, I said to my wife, I can see why Jesus used this as the setting for his parable. It's a winding, meandering road. It's really conducive for ambushing. You start out in Jerusalem, which is about 1,200 miles, or rather 1,200 feet above sea level. And by the time you get down to Jericho, 15 or 20 minutes later, you're about 2,200 feet below sea level. That's a dangerous road. In the days of Jesus, it came to be known as the bloody paths. And you know, it's possible that the priest and the Levite looked over that man on the ground and wondered if the robbers were still around. Or it's possible that they felt that the man on the ground was merely faking, and he was acting like he had been robbed and hurt in order to seize them over there, lure them there for quick and easy seizure. And so the first question that the priest asked, the first question that the Levite asked was, if I stop to help this man, what will happen to me? But then the Good Samaritan came by, and he reversed the question. If I do not stop to help this man, what will happen to him? That's the question before you tonight. Not if I stop to help the sanitation workers, what will happen to my job? Not if I stop to help the sanitation workers, what will happen to all of the hours that I usually spend in my office every day and every week as a pastor? The question is not if I stop to help this man in need, what will happen to me? The question is, if I do not stop to help the sanitation workers, what will happen to them? That's the question.
So I hope folks will think about that question as we go through the weekend and as we think about how we're going to spend the rest of the year. What's going to happen to folks if I don't stop to help them?
Right.
That's a good thing to think about as we live our lives and think about what we want to spend our time on. And yeah, so really enjoy listening to him.
Absolutely. And you know, there's a power in solidarity, and I believe that is something that he speaks to, and something that we believe on this show. And I think it's demonstrated every day through the power of collective action, and demonstrated throughout our history.
Yeah, absolutely.
Jacob, I know we had a few plugs to try to get out before we get off the radio here. You want me to go ahead and take those away?
Yep. Don't forget, our UMWA Sisters and Brothers still on strike. You can support the striking families by donating to their strike pantry at paypal.me/UMWA Strike Pantry. Friends of the show, Obed Edom, have a new album out. Check it out on Bandcamp. On January 16th at 4 p.m. Central, Haymarket Books will be hosting an online conversation entitled On the Line, a conversation on class, solidarity, and building a union, featuring Daisy Pitkin and Jesse Sharkey, who's from the Chicago Teachers Union. Definitely consider going to that. The Citizens Coalition for Justice Reform here in Huntsville is going to be holding an in-person and family-friendly meeting the third week of January. Stay tuned for details on time and location. The community survey results, 2023 outlook, and a closer look at redistricting are all on the agenda. Labor Notes has some online workshops. Secrets of a Successful Organizer January workshop series will run on Thursdays from 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. Central on January 12th, 19th, and 26th. If you haven't attended a Labor Notes training, or if you're at all interested in learning more about any kind of organizing, workplace or otherwise, then definitely consider checking it out. On February 7th, they have a training called What to Do When Your Union Breaks Your Heart at 6:30 p.m. Central. Labor Notes is also going to be in Chattanooga with an in-person Secrets of a Successful Organizer training on January the 28th from 10 to 5. I believe the time is Eastern. The space is limited and registration is required. For all of these, go to labornotes.org for details and to register. You can leave us a voicemail at 844-899-TVLR. You can buy a hat, give us money on our website, tvlr.fm. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the show if you haven't yet. We're going to be going into overtime, where we are going to be talking to Asa Liebman, popular TikToker, about his work. We're going to also be talking about this Supreme Court case about the right to strike and more. So stay tuned. Find us online, YouTube, Facebook, all that good stuff at the Valley Labor Report. Until then, all power to the workers. All right, that's going to take us off of the air. Appreciate y'all staying with us. We've got some great stuff lined up for you in overtime today. So make sure you don't go anywhere. We are going to take a short break and be right back. Welcome back. Thanks for hanging out. You are still listening to the Valley Labor Report, Alabama's only union talk radio program. We're now in overtime, and like I said, we got some good stuff for you. Talking to Asa Liebman. He is a pipe fitter, plumber pipe fitter in Arizona, who does a TikTok. Very cool TikTok. And we're going to be talking about some other issues before we bring him on. And so let's start with this stuff going on at the Supreme Court. Y'all may have heard about this issue at the Supreme Court, Glacier Northwest versus the Teamsters. And, the facts of this case are basically that these Teamsters drive concrete mixing trucks. And they went on strike as they had cement in their truck. And if they had turned the trucks off while the cement was inside, the cement would have hardened inside of the mixer and totally destroyed the truck. And that would have been just a ridiculous amount of damage. But they did not do that. They left the trucks running so that the employer was able to get the cement out. Now, without the labor of the Teamsters, they were not able to deliver the cement, and so some of the cement was ruined over the course, because of the strike. And so Glacier Northwest is attempting to sue the union for damages because of this lost product. Now, before this ridiculous era of conservative, pro-capitalist judiciary, it had already been settled that expiration of goods is not something that employers could sue unions for. Whether we're thinking about a milkman not delivering the milk and so the milk goes bad. These are cases that have been had before, as I understand it, in the courts. And the courts have said, no, that's legitimate. That's legitimate. And if you really want to make sure that the milk doesn't go bad, you can get scabs, right? And it's not like Glacier Northwest did not know that the strike was happening. So they could have acquired scabs to make sure that the cement didn't go bad and it was able to be delivered and whatever.
Or, of course, sign a fair contract with their own employees as to avoid a strike, because never forget that a strike is indication of management's failure to negotiate.
Exactly. So, the cement did go bad. The cement went bad, and so it was like a couple $10,000 of, damages or something that they're trying to get, I think. But this would really open the door. The Supreme Court taking this case at all, even though the Washington Supreme Court was unanimous, like there wasn't a single dissent in the fact that on the Washington Supreme Court, and they all said basically, this is settled law. You can't sue them for damages over this. This is a legitimate outcome of a legitimate bargaining tactic. And so, this is what it is, right? It is what it is. And not only was the Supreme Court unanimous in Washington, there were typically a lot of times what will happen, one of the reasons that the Supreme Court will take up a case is because there's a conflict in the district courts, right? So if a federal court in Texas rules one way on a thing and then a federal court in New York rules a different way, then on a similar issue, then the Supreme Court will take one of these cases to settle the conflict. To say, okay, look, here's who's right, who's wrong, and here's the law. Here's how you are to interpret the law, other federal courts. But there was no conflict in the federal courts. Everybody was under the understanding that this case was rightly decided. There was no conflict at the district level. There was no conflict on the Washington Supreme Court. So really, it's absurd that they took this case because there's nothing to settle here unless they are just intent on overturning decades of precedent, which could be the case.
Right. Seems to be the indication.
And if they do that, then if they undo this precedent, then that really opens the door up to all manner of other stuff, beyond just the type of stuff that we're talking about. But even just the type of stuff that we're talking about. What if Starbucks baristas go on strike and for 3 days and their milk goes bad? Well, even though this exact situation has been decided on, it might be overturned. And the Starbucks baristas will have to pay for the product that went bad because they did not give their labor to the company for using a protected tactic in bargaining.
You know, it reminds me of a couple of months ago, if listeners will recall, Warrior Matt Cole tried something along these lines. They tried to get the NLRB to side with them and force the UMWA to pay them millions of dollars, not just for direct cost associated with the strike, but going so far as to argue they should be responsible for lost production.
Right.
I mean, the whole point of a strike is to withhold labor and therefore stop production and therefore hurt the employer in the pocketbook, right? That is a leverage. And what the Supreme Court is looking at doing is stripping that leverage that we have as working people through the collective action of withholding our labor. That is a very scary prospect.
The employer in Glacier, so they want to overturn this, and their attorney, who is interestingly a former Donald Trump Solicitor General, began his argument by comparing the spoilage of a partial day's worth of concrete with federal security guards leaving their post in the middle of a terrorist threat.
Oh, you mean like their people did on January 6th? Oh, okay.
A ferry boat crew abandoning ship in the middle of a river, and steelworkers walking out in the middle of a molten iron pour, risking extensive damage to the factory equipment. These are all totally different things that we're talking about. I mean, okay, look, so here's a compromise that maybe I'll be willing to make. If they began their strike as they were driving, they're like driving the cement trucks down the road towards the building, and they just jump out, and they've all got like beds and stuff on the side of the road, so they're prepared for this. And they jump out, and the truck just happens to, go into the building. Okay, that seems probably
maybe a bit much.
Maybe a bit much. I don't know. Maybe it should be legal. Maybe it shouldn't be. But at least under the current regime, we can understand that would be illegal. Okay, we can understand that you can't just start your strike while you're barreling down the road at 70 miles an hour. Okay? But that's totally different than this situation. These trucks they were continued mixing the cement so that they did not destroy the trucks. We just had 1 day's worth of product that was spoiled, which is legitimate. And so this is a very, very concerning precedent that the Supreme Court could very well take. And, this is something to keep your eye on. This is something to keep your eye on.
Well, and the other thing, another piece to this conversation is how will labor respond?
Right.
How will the labor movement, institutionally, as far as the AFL-CIO, the Teamsters and others, how are they going to respond to the Supreme Court situation and how the landscape may change? Because we've been down this road before with some other issues. We had the Janus case a few years ago, going after agency fees. So I'm just curious to know, how is organized labor, big labor, quote unquote, how is big labor going to respond to this? Because there has been a tendency, I think, as labor institutionalized, after its heyday, and we've seen this long decline, I think there's been a tendency for big labor to stick within the legal terrain and just try to do the best they can within the process, right? But that process continually gets worse. The legal terrain continually gets worse for us as working people. So, I think leaders of the labor movement have to be really looking at the implications of a case like this and how that may impact strategies and tactics.
Right.
I hope that there are people, higher up in the labor movement than me that are really having those conversations and thinking through that.
They're important conversations to have, and how are we gonna? I don't know.
And how are we as a people going to respond to the fact that we have this Supreme Court, this institution of 9 unelected individuals, in this case, 5-6 individuals, continually stripping rights away from us that have been won historically over the past century and a half.
Right.
We live in a Gilded Age economy, and we have a Supreme Court and others that are trying to, bring our society back to the Gilded Age as well. The legal framework, the constitutional framework. So that's something else I think that we as a labor movement have to be looking at is like, yes, this specific Supreme Court case, how it may impact our ability to strike effectively. But what are we going to do about the situation in general? Where we have essentially this rogue Supreme Court that is, unaccountable and continually doing damage to our lives and our rights.
Right. I also wanted to talk about this Bed Bath & Beyond, which has been, Bed Bath & Beyond has been at the precipice of bankruptcy for years, right? They've been continually every year. They're announcing store closures.
It's been a meme stock lately.
Yeah.
From what I understand.
So last year, the retail, a couple days ago, they came out announcing more closures, more cuts. Despite this, over the last 3 years, they spent $1 billion on stock buybacks. How do you how do you justify that? Your company is on the brink of bankruptcy, and instead of investing in innovation or whatever, that's what capitalism is supposedly, that's what it does, right, is innovation is what they tell us. Instead of investing in innovation, in modernizing your facilities, in attracting the best workforce possible for retail, in investing in your current workforce, in doing anything that is actually going to benefit the company, they're just putting more money into wealthy people's pockets while they're on the brink of bankruptcy. And and this was just a quick hit, but it's it's worth underscoring that these are the titans of our economy and how they choose to allocate resources. And, it's worth questioning, is that actually the best way to allocate resources? Should we just have our economy run by people who happen to have money? And should they just be able to decide what happens to all of this money that is created by other people? Right? Because the wealth of Bed Bath & Beyond was not created by the people, certainly not the people that own it now. Maybe at a certain point, and this is something that Adam and I have talked about on the show, that there's a certain amount of labor that goes into, being a quote-unquote small business owner in some instances, and there's a lot of, quote-unquote hard work that that you do if you're starting up a business and you're actually doing the running of the thing. So I don't know. I'm not familiar with the history of Bed Bath & Beyond. Maybe the original owner was he worked really hard or she worked really hard. I don't know, right? But it's not owned by the original people anymore.
And they didn't produce the towels and comforters and knickknacks that they sell in the store, nor do they unload them from the trucks, nor do they stock them on the shelves or sell them to the customers.
Right. So, all these people that are making these decisions about what to do with the wealth that is created from the enterprise that is Bed Bath & Beyond, are not doing things that is going to be in the best interest of these people. Right? Like if the people who work at Bed Bath & Beyond were able to vote about how these resources were allocated, would they allocate these resources better or worse for the enterprise than just donating $1 billion to wealthy people? I think that just regular working people would be able to better distribute the resources than just donating $1 billion to wealthy people.
Because it's also, the impact on the community. These companies that are like Bed Bath & Beyond that are like sort of teetering on the brink of collapse. And it's like you have these capitalists at the top who are just trying to extract anything and everything that's like not nailed down while the whole thing crumbles. And in its wake, you have unemployed workers. You have empty buildings littering our communities. Businesses that were in our communities that are closed, so now less options for folks, and on and on. But it just speaks to the system we have, where we have an economy that is designed around the pursuit of private profit, not the public good. And public costs are often really private costs that have been socialized, right? You have private industry is able to socialize some of the costs and liabilities of their operations, such as, destroying the entire planet, for example. Meanwhile, the wealth, which is socially created, is privately held onto. I mean, it's going into private pockets. But it is a social creation.
Yeah.
But now, I hope we all remember that, of course, capitalism is so efficient and capitalists are so smart because they wouldn't be rich if they weren't smart, right? So they must be smart to continue being rich.
Right.
And there must be no other way. There's no alternative. This is clearly the most rational way to organize a society and an economy. Yes, ensuring that a crappy Bed Bath & Beyond knick-knack store will deliver dividends for a handful of wealthy folks.
Yeah, exactly. Zoom is up, right? And so we'll be able to know when Asa jumps on?
That's correct, yeah. Asa is not in just yet, but hopefully coming soon.
I had one more thing pulled out, and that is this Charlie Munger. Had you heard his name before? His name sounds vaguely familiar, but I don't.
That name does sound familiar.
He's some billionaire investor, apparently a friend of Warren Buffett. He says that he doesn't understand why people aren't more content with what they have. Quote, people are less happy about the state of affairs than they were when things were way tougher. And just basically says that everybody is 5 times better off than they used to be, so stop complaining.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, I'd like to see exactly how he quantifies all this. How are we 5 times better off? And also, what's the measurement to show that people are like less happy now than they were then with worse conditions? Come on now, you're just... it's easy to say this as a
billionaire, somebody whose net worth is $2.2 billion. Yeah, super easy to say that.
He will never, ever have to worry about survival for himself or his family. Right. And that's something the vast majority of people in this country and on this planet don't get to enjoy.
Yeah, it's just... I mean, could you imagine? Like, he in another place he said something about how inequality is foundational to a free market economy, and it's like, well,
that's true.
Yeah,
no, that is absolutely true. I agree with you. Inequality is foundational to the free market system,
but it's also not the degree to which our inequality is today is not foundational. And we know that, again, because I talked about historical data earlier in the show. We can just look back at historical data for this. We did not always used to be so unequal as a society. Society used to be far more equal than today.
Right.
And it was still capitalism. in 1950 and 1960, right? We were still a, generally speaking, capitalist economy, and yet things were much more equal. And so it's not necessary. You could still be a capitalist economy and have lower levels of inequality.
Well, sure.
And in fact,
compare us to literally every other
right.
wealthy country on planet Earth. The inequality in this country resembles, does not resemble our peers in terms of the wealth and technology that we have as a society. And you're exactly right. Inequality has grown dramatically over the past 5 decades, and that's a result of choices, that's a result of policies, and that's a result of the class war, and we have been losing it. Class struggle exists whether people want to acknowledge it or not, and it's very clear the balance of power has shifted dramatically over the past 5 decades. The wealth that has been created, the gains in productivity, has not gone to working people. Right? It's gone to the top. Capital has held on to those gains in productivity. And to keep pace, because our wages have stagnated, workers have turned to debt to try to keep it going. Right? And, something I just saw in the comments, Sid mentioned that it's worse now than the time of the pharaohs. And that's exactly true. And I've said this before, like, Louis the 16th would be envious of Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk. The sheer scale of inequality that we have, it's almost unfathomable for earlier times. It's just the economy has been captured by just a handful of folks, a handful of families, a handful of companies. By and large, run the vast majority of this economy and own this economy, and that's how our society is organized. And I encourage people to think, like, is that how it has to be? And to your point, even within the system that we have, it has certainly had a different character to it, and we saw a period of progress from the 30s through the 60s, where gains in productivity were by and large being captured by wages for workers. And it was a period of broad prosperity in many ways, notwithstanding the significant, structural barriers for women, for people of color. So there was obviously a lot there, but in terms of the economic system, before neoliberalism really took hold, we did see a gain in working people wages, working people benefits, union rates. Unions were able to drive up the floor for everybody. So even at our peak, we may have only had about a third of the workforce unionized, but that lifted up everybody around. And this idea that, we're so much better off now, I just totally reject, because, 50, 60, 70 years ago, it was much more common and possible for a working class person to leave school, maybe not even finish high school, leave school and go get a good union job that would provide for a family, typically a single income, to provide for a family, and to be able to retire with dignity with a guaranteed pension. And that is just, that's a unicorn now.
Right.
Those jobs. And that's why, when we talk to these brothers and sisters who still hold on to some of those kind of jobs, you see what a struggle it is for them to hold the line.
Right. Well, and I do want to, just for the sake of, the pedant in the comments when we clip this, I do want to acknowledge that there are some improvements, like, air conditioning and the internet, and that in some ways make our lives better, but also the private ownership of some of these things are contributing to, some of the malaise in society, the way that the social media networks have, really, hacked our brains. Wouldn't necessarily be the case if these were, if we had more control over these companies, it seems to me. And also, just because in some ways we're better off than we used to be, doesn't mean things can't be better. And that the even if let's grant that let's just grant that in maybe even the majority of ways, I don't grant this because of what you said, right? Because you could go get out of college, get out of high school, and get a good paying union job and support a family on one income. I think that is really an important piece of society that is just lost now, that is really lost. But even if we were to grant that, that doesn't mean we have to accept people like Charlie Munger having so much more than the rest of us. I mean, if Adam and I both, let's say we worked on a project, let's say we worked on this project and we turned this project, the Valley Labor Report, into a profit-making enterprise, and let's say that somehow we were able to quantify all of the labor that we did, and let's say that he put in 50 hours a week on the project, and I put in 10 hours a week on the project. And let's say I was able to pull in, we pulled in total for the project $100,000. And I kept 90,000 of it, and he kept 10,000 of it. Okay, we could say in a certain way we're both better off than we were before, but it's certainly not fair. We could still say that it's not fair that the person who did most of the work got like 10% of the profits that we made, right? And so, if Adam went public with these allegations, Jacob only worked 10 hours a week and he took $90,000 of the profits that we made, and he only gave me 10. And if I came out and said, look, you had more money than you did before, so shut the hell up, right? We would obviously say that that's not fair, and that's in large part what's going on. Even if we were to accept this narrative, which should be challenged, but even if we were to accept it, that doesn't mean that people at the top deserve so much more money than the rest of us, so much more power than the rest of us, because money is power in our society.
Right. And I mean, and that's not just like thinking about this. Folks smarter than us, including folks at Princeton University, have done the research and done studies to demonstrate the ways in which we do not live in a democratic society. We live in a plutocratic society wherein our society is governed of, by, and for the wealthy, and that the average person's input into the system is negligible compared to the input of the wealthy. That's just a fact. And to your point, yeah, acknowledging where we've made progress is not an acknowledgement that it's good enough. Mm-hmm. I'm glad in certain respects we have made gains, particularly in terms of, say, sexual harassment in the workplace, for example. Right. Things that were routine 50 years ago rarely happen now. They still do, but rarely do, and when they do happen, are taken much more seriously. That's progress.
Right.
That doesn't mean that we've fixed gender issues, right? Forever. Everything's fine now. No, of course not. And it's absurd to think that way. And this billionaire who wants us to be happy, so few have so much, while so many has so little. And millions of people in this country do not have health care. Millions of people in this country couldn't pay for a $500 emergency if it happened to them today. Millions of people in this country are delaying health care. Millions of people in this country have a lifetime of debt just because they wanted to get an education. I mean, give me a break.
Right.
Give me a break. And Asa is in the Zoom, by the way. So
let's go ahead and bring him on. Asa Liebman is a fourth-year apprentice with the UA Local 469, the Plumbers and Pipe Fitters Union in Arizona. I found him on TikTok. He is under the username Bring Things, all one word, Bring Things on TikTok. Fantastic channel, very funny, very lots of good educational stuff, lots of good, also just funny things. So I recommend following him on TikTok. Asa, thanks for joining the show. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So, I guess let's start with the name, Bring Things. What's up with that? Why choose that name for your TikTok channel?
Well, it has no relevance to my content, no relevance to what I make. It is two rhyming things that have to do with my particular mindset when going to anywhere in life, whether that, well, you know what, we can tie it in, whether it be a job site, whether it be to a holiday party, whether it be to get together of friends. I don't want to come empty-handed.
Okay, cool. I like that. You want to bring some things. Well, that's and I think with the TikTok I think you're bringing something to, your description on your TikTok channel is the lighter side of the class struggle. I really like it. It's very comedic. I told you on the phone yesterday or the day before, whenever we spoke, that we would like to bring a little bit more levity to the program, because I don't think that either of us are very comedic. So, so hopefully this is the start of maybe a bit more comedian types, on the program. And so I appreciate what you're doing on your TikTok.
Yeah,
so,
I mean, it's no laughing matter, the issues that we're talking about. But that being said, the people who I have the privilege of working side by side with often have the most genuine and peculiar sense of humor, born of the struggle that we're all engaged in. So, there is historically a context for humor and struggle going hand in hand.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess that kind of leads into, what made you want to start the TikTok channel that you do?
That's actually a really good question. I have a great love for a couple things, and they all tie together very well. When I discovered TikTok, I'm a latecomer to TikTok. I've only started my account about 6 months ago. But the idea of I love short form video. I love comedy. And I love having the opportunity to share ideas. And, the idea is not a new idea, and it's not unique to TikTok. But this idea of the marketplace of ideas, where people can exchange information and ideas. If you go through my following list of who I'm following, it is a complete hodgepodge of union activists and organizers, people in the construction trades, decolonialists, entertainers, comedians, and a few completely random skilled people from skilled areas that I have no idea about, but I love to see people who are good at what they do sharing something they never see in my day-to-day life.
Yeah, and I think you do a good job of of that kind of stuff, and that's something that I really enjoy. That TikTok is a really unique platform. I think obviously, like anything, it's got some problems, but it's something that I definitely enjoy, because you get to see stuff like that you just wouldn't normally see. Like you said, you wouldn't normally be able to take a look at what folks are doing, what folks are thinking in other environments. And so the one of the things that we talked about is that your channel is not exclusively focused on kind of union propaganda or union activism or thoughts of a union organizer. But that's a big part of it, right? A big part of your TikTok is this is why unions are good, or this is something that I have been able to see as a union worker. And you told me that you actually spent 10 years as a SAG-AFTRA member, as a stunt performer in movies. And that, before going into this industry, you were more of just a paper member. Your politics were broadly aligned, but, you just didn't really participate very much. And so can you talk to us a bit about the interest that you have now in participation in the labor movement, why you think it's important to talk about this stuff, to try to educate people and to put yourself out there in, the marketplace of ideas, and whether that be on TikTok or also in your workplace while you're talking to your coworkers, your brothers and sisters from your union.
Yeah, sure. So, one of the factors is simply growing up, or rather living my life experience, right? When I worked in stunts, I was a very young man, and I had other things on my mind that seemed far more important than, as a lot of young people do, that were far more important than what some would call these like abstract and grandiose ideas, which through my lived experience, I discovered that there is a depth and permeation to this class struggle and the importance of workplace organization that is not like a secondary thing. It permeates like every part of our culture. And even just listening to the previous segment a little bit, just talking about these basic ideas of class inequality and the lack of equity in our society. I mean, this is something that is found everywhere you look. This is not something that is unique to a specific trade or a specific shop or a specific job site. This is something that is evident not only in our environment, but it's something that we have, for the most part, as working people, internalized to an extreme extent, and starting to recognize that from, once again, like my lived experience, reaching out a little bit for education, reading a little bit, but mostly it's from keeping an open mind and talking to other people and learning their experiences and trying to look at life through a little bit more critical lens of than the survival that we often go day to day, one foot in front of the other.
Right. And, your lived experience, I guess we can kind of talk about that for a little bit. And specifically, I mean, the benefits that you have through your apprenticeship and soon to be a journeyman once you're able to complete it. Once you're able to complete your apprenticeship, you're a fourth-year apprentice with UA Local 469. What are some of those things? And you were a member of SAG-AFTRA for 10 years. So what are some of the benefits of unionization that you've been able to see and compare to people that work in the same industry without being members of the union?
Sure. Well, the first thing that's on the tip of my tongue now, because of the segment just before this, I believe Adam is the other gentleman.
Yes.
Yeah. So Adam was talking about that health insurance, I believe, and how many millions of people who work a full-time job, right? These are people who contribute to society every day. They build things, they move things, they keep what we need as a culture to continue happening. And they cannot be sick. They cannot have health issues. Whether or not the reality of that happens doesn't matter, because they cannot miss work. And if they have to miss work, then they cannot afford the medical treatment that they need. So one of the most easily contrasted things between a lot of what I've seen from the non-signatory shops versus organized laborers of any trade is the access to healthcare. And that is something that is not insignificant. And people look at numbers on a check, and those can vary, right? I know in my area that we do make more on the check, right? Because that's, we just talked about internalizing the capitalism, right? Where this money is, the dollar amount is your value as a human being. But being able to provide for you and your family to have adequate healthcare is sadly an unusual privilege in today's society. So that's the number one thing that stands out to me.
Yes, and I think that and we're going to talk about this when we react to this other video with you that I found on TikTok about free time and the non-monetary benefits of unionization, and I think that a lot of times even people in unions can kind of lose sight of that and lose sight of the importance of things like free time and healthcare and retirement, and they get lost. They get kind of lost in the sauce, right? They're just looking at what does the number on the check look like every 2 weeks, and when really, I think we should be more focused on taking our time back from the boss than we are, because we see in a lot of these instances, union workers have given a lot of their time up. They've allowed themselves to be worked, by virtue of the fact that, they live in a society and all these structures and material conditions and all of this. But, the fact remains that a lot of people work, including union workers, work more than we used to, work more than we have to make a living. And instead of pushing for more money on the paycheck, maybe it's time that we start thinking about, like, how do we pull back some of our time and some of these other things.
Yeah, I mean, that's an absolutely great point. We have these allowances and a lot of collective bargaining agreements, right? And a lot of contracts that protect us, right? With these overtime hours, right? Which were, I believe, meant to be protections and disincentives from overwork. And instead, the change in perception is, in order to make a good living, or what that higher dollar amount on the check, it's no longer about being able to take care of myself and my family with the hours, the 40-hour work week, right? Now it's how much overtime can I get, because that's what I need to have a quality of life.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So, with that, I think let's take a look at some of your work. I wanted to show some folks, and so we've pulled up. We've pulled 4 of your TikToks, and you've got six months worth of content. So like I said, folks follow, bring things on TikTok. But I wanted to show folks a few of them and let you say, talk about like maybe some of your inspirations for some of these, and take a look at them. So Adam, let's take a look at this first one, and Asa, you can talk to us about it.
And we're also going to hope and pray that they all work, and everything works as it's supposed to, and all the cameras cooperate. So here we go.
Better ingredients, better pizza, better bitches, better money, my clothes better, my shoes better, I work harder. Fuck Little Caesars, fuck Domino's.
So I think that, Asa, that was actually the first video of yours that I saw, and not for nothing, that one went really, really viral. So, talk to us about that, I guess. and I know that one of the things in comedy that makes things really funny is when you explain the joke, right? So. Is he still there?
Uh-oh. Sorry about that. For some reason, You were muted for a sec. So, sorry.
Yeah, well, there can only be one of me on the screen at a time, I believe.
There we go. That's what it is. It's just too much. Like, it just overwhelmed the system.
So yeah, that was one of my first, like you said, like very well received videos, and it was pretty simple and straightforward. There is a sound by another creator that was being used for all kinds of different things in that vein, and I had just recently had an experience talking to a non-union worker on a job site that was asking me some questions, and I noticed myself getting very animated, right, when I was talking about the benefits, and it is something that I'm passionate about, right? I'm not doing this. My local is not paying me to make these TikToks. So it is something that I'm very passionate about, and the connection got made in my head. And the next time I had the chance to make a video, I went ahead and did it. The only problem that I had making that video is when I'm listing the benefits of joining a union, right? He only says better ingredients, better pizza, better bitches. You know, he only says a couple things, and there's way more things that I could think of to put it this down. So I cherry picked a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I have a lot of that, or a similar animation. Like, when I'm talking to people, I can get pretty animated, and I gesticulate and use my arms a lot, and my family loves it, of course. But there's you also, there are some videos, and in this one you kind of do it in a pretty funny way, where there are some annoyances that you can have with other union workers, and some things that come up. And so let's talk about, or let's play this one, and Adam, make sure that that his Zoom video is like below the TikTok, because I don't think that they were able to actually see that the last TikTok. So in the frames, we want to make sure that his Zoom video is below that. But yeah, let's check out this next TikTok that we have pulled.
All right, and Jacob, just letting you know, it is gonna do what it's gonna do.
Yeah.
So bear with us.
All right. So were we able to see that one?
Yes, I do believe we
Fantastic.
saw that one. Unfortunately, it showed up over Asa's current face. So yeah, still only one Asa on the screen at one time apparently is all that we can handle on the Valley Labor Report. But speaks to you.
Yeah. So Asa, talk to us about that one. When who pissed you off that day? What's the deal there?
There's a little piece of red tape there that I set up just specifically to make the point. But on a lot of construction sites, especially when you have a lot of trade stack and a lot of people working together, or working together, you'll have situations where your work or your convenience or your fastest route is going to be blocked by somebody else's work. And I felt like it was something that was going to be really relatable, because how much people love complaining about their coworkers. So that's essentially what that is. I was poking a little bit of fun at myself, because I will be talking about worker solidarity at a coffee break, and then on my way back to the work area, I am cussing the crap out of the electricians for blocking my way.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that, very much so.
So this third one here is something that we very much relate to on the program, and it's about politicians and the way that they'll talk to you, and even some of the times, like the way that our union leaders will talk about these politicians versus what happens after they actually get in office. So Adam, let's play that one.
All right, and again, where it will show up on the screen is anyone's guess. It's kind of like a roulette. We're playing TikTok roulette. Will it show up? Will it not? Will you hear it? We'll find out.
I wanna let you know I feel. Fuck what I said, it don't mean shit now.
So I think that that's something that that we can all really, really relate to, especially after 2 years of like Democrats in the Senate and the House and the presidency, right?
Sure, yeah. It wasn't my politics are not partisan as far as like Democrat versus Republican, which is why I left it specifically as politicians, because this is something that in our politics happens across the board, and it happens constantly. We are pandered to, and that might be the tamest and most respectful way to put it, is that we are regularly pandered to by everybody, because it's simple. I mean, they want our votes. They want to be relatable. They show up on a job site. They'll
put on the hard hat.
Yeah, put the hard hat on, roll up their sleeves, maybe make some cool catchphrase about how, we're working hard for working families, or some, some frothy emotional appeal like that. And at the end of the day, they serve a system that does not serve the people.
Right. Yeah. And, it's funny how these folks that will show up for the Labor Day picnic, the Labor Day march, but then you don't hear from them for 4 years. Or, you got an issue going on and they're not very responsive when it's, crunch time. But now if they got the Labor Day barbecue, they are going to show up, shake hands, pass out their literature. It's just all the time in between when we might actually need something from them. Then all of a sudden they get a little scarce.
Yeah.
Yeah, we hear a lot more. During election season from these candidates supporting us than we do when they have achieved their goal and are sitting, actually have some influence on policy.
Yeah, come to me to the Labor Day picnic on an off year and tell me what you accomplished.
Right.
Since the last picnic. How about that? I would love to see some politicians take that approach.
Yeah, that would be pretty nice. And the last one is another benefit of unionization that you didn't talk about in that first clip, but is very important, and that's your protection from unjust retaliation. Adam, let's play this one.
It would appear that I have potentially been too silly and or goofy for my own good.
So here we go, right? Your union contract is going to protect your right to be silly on the job, right? And I think that's an important thing.
Sometimes you got to call a rep.
Yeah.
Yes, and you did mention the tag in my bio that says the lighter side of class struggle. There's also a disclaimer on there that says videos are not recorded on company time. So so that's just something I want to put out there, and I stand by it.
In case anyone's
make it clear.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah,
anyone snitching or trying to cause problems, this is all in the up and up.
At the end of the day, that is one of the most important parts of organization and collective bargaining or just collectivization in general, right, of the union, is that individually we have very, very little power. A worker has such a small amount of control and leverage in the world that we live in. And I'm preaching to the choir here, I believe, but to have a representative that speaks with to have a representative that has the interests of the worker at heart is a rare thing in this world. And this is one of the only places where I was able to find it in my personal life. And then for that representative to not only have the intention, but to also have the backing of a large amount and a group of workers, enough so to have any kind of leverage or any kind of weight behind their words and their representation and their intentions. That is a beautiful and rare thing.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, when I previously served as a representative, I remember one of the earliest cases I dealt with was a lunch lady who had been on the job for, over 20 years. She was close to retirement. She was going to retire early over a relatively minor issue. And it wasn't really that big of an issue in my eyes, but for her it was. But what she needed was just the confidence. She needed a representative who actually, as you said, had her interest in heart, cared what happened to her, someone she could talk to. And that's honestly all she needed. We didn't need to file a grievance. We didn't need to get a lawyer. She just needed a game plan on how to handle the situation. And she needed someone in her corner to root for her and give her that confidence. And she told me later that that's what it was, that it just gave her the confidence to speak to her management, to get the issue resolved. And, that's something that workers who've never experienced that are really missing out. And oftentimes people think they will never need it, right? My time as a rep, at least half the people who called me, the first thing out of their mouth was, well, I never thought I'd have to call you.
Right.
I never thought I'd be in your office, but here we are. And so you never know. You never know what can happen to you. You are one unfair supervisor or honest mistake or wrong place, wrong time away from being in a world of shit.
Yeah.
And it makes a difference when you have someone you can call who is there to represent you and advocate for you and be in your corner. It's huge difference. So yeah, I'm glad you really put that out there, in a funny way. But it's true though. We need to be able to just be ourselves at work and feel okay that someone's not watching over our shoulder, that every little comment is going to be scrutinized and every remark is going to be grounds for termination. And that's that security that you have when you have a union contract. You've got a union backing you up. You have due process. That, no, motherfucker, you better come to me with something real if you're going to fire me. Right. Don't make something up. Don't come at, these little nitpicky things. That is a union difference. To say, you can't just talk to me any kind of way. You can't just get rid of me any kind of way. I have rights.
Right. And at the end of the day, a lot of working people like me, I will admit to not being a union lawyer, right? Admit to not know my CBA cover to cover. I try to be better about it. But when I'm at work, I focus on my work. I take pride in my work. Most of the people that I do the same, and we focus on it. And not everybody has the penchant or interest in interpersonal relations or interdepartmental relations or labor, anything like that, where to have a representative who is first in all of those things and has your interests at heart is incredibly valuable, because it lets people that are like me or like my coworkers, right, the people that I work with every day, it lets us focus on the work and not have to be constantly looking over our shoulder and digging up reasons that we need to defend ourselves constantly.
Right, absolutely.
And this last clip that I pulled from TikTok, it's not yours, but since I found it on TikTok and you're from TikTok, I figured we'd let you riff on it. But we talked some about the importance of free time, and I don't have any reason to believe that the person who's mentioned here is in a union or anything like that, but it really does speak to the importance and the value to individuals and to even, greater society for people to have free time to just, screw around and, do whatever they want to do. So Adam, let's play this last clip and react to it.
A random guy may have just rewritten human history with his bombshell discovery. In what might be a major archaeological breakthrough, a furniture specialist thinks the earliest writing in human history has been hiding in plain sight. In Europe, hundreds of caves, including Les Sceaux in France and Altamira in Spain, are decorated with hundreds of paintings of animals and other figures that were made between 15,000 and 40,000 years ago, back when humans were still hunter-gatherers. And these paintings have contained dots and lines that have long evaded explanation, until now. Ben Bacon, a furniture conservator from London who has described himself as effectively a man off the street, was just looking at pictures of this Paleolithic cave art online one day when he noticed those dots and line markings and had a hunch that they might be decipherable. In a testament to the wonders of free time, Bacon apparently spent hours online and in the British Library consulting pictures of cave drawings. He said he amassed as much data as possible and began looking for repeated patterns. So previous researchers suggested that the markings might be numerical notations used to count the amount of animals sighted or killed. Bacon made a leap to suggest they might form a calendar system designed to track the life cycles of the animals in the pictures. Bacon then reached out to leading archaeologists at Durham University and the University College London to develop the idea further and co-author a study, which was published on Thursday in the Cambridge Archaeological Journal. So the lines and dots seen were thought to be a lunar calendar, and the researchers also analysed a Y shape, which was thought to represent an animal's birthing period because the shape kind of looks like open legs. To oversimplify, the researchers compiled a database with over 600 dot and line sequences, as well as some 250 sequences with the Y shape. And after conducting statistical analysis of the database, Bacon and his colleagues were amazed to find that their lunar calendar lined up with the known birthing periods of the animals shown in the caves. Professor Pettit, one of the researchers from Durham University, said he was glad he took it seriously when Bacon reached out to him. As Bacon told Motherboard, the discovery shows our Paleolithic ancestors were just as cognitively advanced as we are, and that their society achieved great art, numbers, and writing. Bacon told Motherboard his team wanted to hold back on the celebrations until all of their research was published. But if their hypothesis is accurate, this discovery would push the timeline of written language back tens of thousands of years.
A furniture specialist. Like, how cool is that?
It's just fascinating, and it drives it really spits in the face of this talking point that I see in discourse constantly, in support of our current system, right? The thing that so commonly online is that our system, as it is, the capitalism that we have, innovates. Capitalism creates innovation, right? Breeds innovation. I've heard it a couple different ways. They point at all these examples and all these technological marvels that come from these developed countries, and they completely ignore this fact, right? This idea that for every one of those people, how many of us, how many working people, how many brilliant kids, how many people with these inquisitive minds are unable to innovate or unable to contribute what they have to society because of the need for them to survive, to feed themselves, to maybe work those 70, 80 hours a week, instead of letting their true potential come out and contribute to society in another way.
Yeah, and he didn't, it's not like this person, there's no way that they would have been able to do this if they had to work that 70, 80 hours a week to survive, right? This person had a pretty significant amount of free time. And also, it's worth mentioning, they say that, people, when we're talking about increasing, the tax rate on the wealthy, well, what would be their motivation for doing anything if you, increase their tax rate from 30% to 50%, right? But this person, there's no indication that this person is going to get wealthy from it. Maybe there's some amount of compensation that they're going to get, but it's not going to be millions or billions of dollars, even though they really changed the timeline of human history with their, free time discovery. It's, people are motivated by all sorts of things, and money is only one of those things. And I think that it's really not that strong of a factor, I mean, once you have enough money to survive, I think that most people are going to be motivated by other things, as this person clearly was. And everybody should be able to be motivated by other things. I think that there was somebody who said, I'm not particularly interested in Einstein's, particular IQ or whatever. I'm more interested in how many Einsteins we've lost due to, them not being able to flourish, them not having the free time, the surroundings to be able to become an Einstein. How many people were smarter than Einstein that slaved away in a diamond mine in Africa or something, or in how many people have we lost like that? Right.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, both of you guys made that point that we all have our potential to contribute, and we all have our own motivations. And I think this idea that, the only way to run a society is that the vast majority of people are threatened with homelessness and starvation if they don't go work for someone else, I just reject that that's our only option. I find that to not be true. I think that people now and throughout human history have always created things, innovated things, built things, made things better, helped other people, helped their community. People have always done these things for a variety of reasons. And
nobody was filing patents on fire. Nobody filed a patent on the wheel, right, so that they're these are things that were contributed because they were discovered and they were monumental, right? So
right. And that's also something that clip kind of gets to in terms of, if you want to talk about our ancient past. I mean, it's easy to think that the current system we have now, the system of capitalism and hierarchy that accompanies it, is like, right, they want us to think it's natural, right? That this is just like the way things are. This is the natural system. But it's only a few centuries old. Human beings have been on this planet for a very long time, and for over 90% of that history, there was no class or state involved, right? So it's a misnomer to think that the way things are right now is the only way, or that it's the natural way. I just reject that.
Evolution of the way, right? Because that's the other thing that I hear is, well, it used to be different, and because this is how we do it now, therefore this is the better way, right? The system, this is the way of society that is a natural and better evolution of what we had before. I'm not necessarily disagreeing with the putting a value judgment on it, but it certainly is not, in my opinion, and a lot of other people's opinion, it is not the final form, so to speak.
Right, yeah. It's not like history has ended. And, that was sort of the triumphal claim in the 90s, as the Soviet Union collapsed. It's like, okay, well, here we go. Case closed. Capitalism won. Like, buckle up. That's the rest of our lives. That's the rest of humanity's existence. But, there were people at one time who thought feudalism would never go away. They never imagined a time where your worth was not marked by, your bloodline and noble titles and divine right of kings. It would have 500 years ago, 600 years ago, you would have found a lot of people who would have had trouble conceptualizing an existence outside of that, right? And I don't know that we're so unique now. And the idea that the system we have now will be eternal, I think is arrogant, and I think it's ahistorical. And if it comes out to be true, it's just because we self-destruct, and the system takes us down with it. That I know we've gotten kind of deep into like philosophical nature of our society here, based on some TikTok videos. But yeah, those are my thoughts.
Well, sure, and you know what, I just want to say, like, as much as like it, it's like, oh, it's silly we're talking about these deep philosophical things, but I think that kind of brings up a really good point, which is, and also this ties in a little bit to the man of deducing the calendar from the cave paintings, right? Is that we constantly give ourselves less credit. We constantly look back and give people less credit, right? These people drawing horses in caves or whatever, they there's no way that they could have tracked a calendar, right? We look back, there's no way that people could have done this, because the way that we do things today is so great. And I see it a lot internalized even on the job site today, right? Where or in our society today, where people think that these men and women, these people that are working with the tools, these people that are working with their hands, that we are somehow less intelligent and somehow less aware, and somehow that we perceive society through some foggy, coal-smoked lens of a stupid factory worker or I'm a neck down person and all I could do is turn a wrench or swing a hammer. And my experience has shown that this is so far from the truth. Discussions like this one that we're having right now, I've had on the job site with iron workers and plumbers and welders and laborers. So I am very strongly disagree with the idea that these deeper philosophical debates aren't something that is natural to us as humans. It has nothing to do with our class or our level of formal education.
Yeah.
I agree with that. And I've found very similar things in my experience as well. Like, I've had some really deep analytical conversations with working class people, many of whom did not have college degrees, some of whom didn't even finish high school. But, it doesn't take an education or an income to have an imagination. And I think that's one thing that is sorely lacking.
Yeah.
Fully agree. Oh, go ahead.
No. I was just about to wrap up.
And,
okay.
As we do wrap up, I wanted to say, Asa, I really appreciate what you're doing and like how you're reaching people. I am a little bit older than Jacob, and I am a lot less online. So like, I'm not really a big TikTok guy, and I'm not really on social media a ton. But I really am impressed with what you're doing and how you're reaching people. And I think it's just, we need more of that in the labor movement, of reaching people where they are, however that looks like. And I think you've found a way to reach people on a platform and with humor in a way that's really cool. And I just really appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you. I try way harder than it looks like I try.
Yeah, well,
we know that feeling.
I guess the last thing that the last thing I meant to ask you this and I forgot. How many? Because some of these, there's a couple of them that you did where like you look cool as shit, man. Like just like super like I'm like a worker or like I'm thinking of the one where you're laying down your toolbox and you're like clocking out to post like anti-boss content or something, and it's like, wow, this guy looks like really big, strong, cool worker guy. How many times did you have to tape that? Was that a one and done, or did you have to get the look? Did you have to do it a few times?
That was completely a one and done. Just a total fluke of lighting. I will say that sometimes, especially with some of the format of lip syncing to somebody else talking, or I do think of what I do as art, right? So things like angles and lighting are important to me, and I do entertain people sometimes in the parking lot or on the job site with just imagine seeing me in my high vis vest and my hard hat, and I've got my phone set up, and I'm bashing my head saying a couple lines and bashing my head into a toolbox a bunch of times over and over again until I get the time. Definitely giving some people entertainment who have no idea what the hell I'm doing.
That's awesome. Asa Liebman, fourth-year apprentice from UA Local 469 in Arizona. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today. I appreciate it, man.
Thanks for having me out. You guys have a great show.
Appreciate it.
And that's going to wrap it up for us today. So we're going to go ahead and roll out. Appreciate everybody hanging out. Don't forget, you can support the show on TVLR.fm on our website. And until then, we will see you next week.
Bye, y'all.